Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our chapter leader webinar training today. This is the second webinar this week that we have hosted for the new website. My name is Jenna Eberly, and I'm the education coordinator for CLMA. We have with us PJ Lesher today, who's our IT specialist, who's going to walk you through some of the new features that we have on our site. We're very excited about this, and we hope that you are too. For the purposes of this training today, for questions, we're going to ask that you use the chat dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will get to questions towards the end of the training today, and we will also be following up with you with a handout by the end of today that you can review over the weekend as you're practicing loading some of this content on your new page. So with that, I'll give it over to PJ.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Jenna. The purpose of today's training isn't necessarily training that you're expected to walk away after this hour and remember how to do every single step. We really just want to introduce some of the functionality, kind of show you what's there, and let you know what's going to be included in the instructions so you know what type of options you have, basically, and different tools are available to you. The step-by-step information and actual walkthrough, where to go, what to do, steps to take to get there, are all going to be in that information that is sent out later on today that Jenna mentioned. So everybody should actually now be seeing the new site. The platform we're on is called Socius. And so if you hear me refer to Socius, it's simply the platform we're on. We're talking about the program for the new site. We're moving over from the platform that was called Your Membership, just to give some context in case you refer to that later on as well too. So one of the things with Socius is that you actually have, unlike with the old site, you have an external and an internal homepage. The external homepage is meant to be public-facing. It's not meant to have all of the information for all of the members. It's really supposed to be kind of an about, an introduction, more of a marketing avenue, I guess you could say, for the organization, because we want people to log in so we can dynamically pull in some content, which you'll see in just a little bit. For purpose of what we're talking about today, strictly with chapters, we definitely wanted to make the chapter experience, one, easy to get to, and two, easy to use. I know one of the things with the old site was basically you get to a lot of the content for chapters without needing to log in or even being a member of the chapter. That's one of the changes with the new site. The reason for that is just like with the organization, we want people to be a member to have access to different tools. We really want to drive people to see the benefit in joining a chapter, to get used to those tools, to be able to take part in your forums, your file libraries, as well, so that it's not just open to everybody, but rather they're then in turn going to pay dues so they can get to those tools and actually use them, and in turn as well get access to the cheaper rates for conferences, and at the same time too give you a good way to promote those conferences to people who aren't members and might not be able to get into those proprietary information that you have if you're a member of the chapter. There is a few different ways you can actually get to chapters. There's obviously, we know that chapters are important to CLMA members. We have chapters right in the menu. There are different ways you can join a chapter, find out information about them. You can get directly to the chapters you're a member of if you're a member of more than one. The same thing down here. You can go directly to chapter information. And because it's a member benefit, because it's members as well too, once you log in, you'll actually see it under the Member Center as well too. If you weren't going to any of these things, you would actually just log in the top right. I'm actually going to go there just so you're seeing kind of the full site and seeing the context of everything. But if you are clicking on any of these, like this, for example, you want to go directly to My Chapters, it's going to force you to log in. But any of these other options, it won't actually do that if it's public information, information you don't need to be logged in for. So I'm going to log in on the top right corner. And this is what I refer to as the internal homepage. So I'm logged in. The site knows who I am. and in turn can display certain information to me. I can do things like have favorites for my forums and select which forums I have as my favorites. I've actually made myself, for purposes of today's demo, a member of the, and an admin of these groups as well too, the chapter leaders, the Bay State chapter, and the Minnesota chapter. And I also then in turn added those forums to my favorites. As a result, I have a direct link here to them on my internal homepage for the site as a whole. And at the same time, too, because I have marked them as a favorite, I'm seeing different forum posts that have actually come in from those forums as well, too. If I wanted to, I could go directly into one of those forums from this page, not have to actually go to the chapter information first, which I'll come back to the forums as well, though, too. I'm logged in. It knows that I'm a member already, so we've set up a couple things in that you have these buttons off the top. If you're not a member, if you're just a guest of the website, you don't pay dues, but you still have access to maybe some e-learning courses that you've purchased. We want to make sure people can log in and get access to those. You can see different things over here for those folks, but for who we're talking about today, you're all going to be members of chapters. You're all going to be admins. So if you go directly to my chapters, it actually displays who you are a member of, and you can go directly into those pages. Like I mentioned, the user that I have actually is a member of each one of these, so that's what they're seeing. If they were a member of the Aloha chapter, it would know that, and it would actually show Aloha chapter in this selection. So it just shows the communities that you are a member of. And one of the things I need to mention as well too, as far as terminology, I guess for the site, you'll hear me refer to as a community. And what that means is basically the spot where you go for all of these tools that I'm talking about today as well too. Forums, file libraries, a landing page for the group that's, if you are a member, you have access to that tool. And I'll come back to that as well too. But first I want to cover, if you're not a member of these groups, you can select join a chapter up here as well too. It's going to give you benefits of being a different chapter. You can see go here, or also if you want to go directly to a list of chapters, the same thing actually, this link down here. You get a list of all different chapters along with the dues, so you can go directly to that information for that chapter. Let's actually, on each one of these pages, you'll actually see information for the chapter itself. Let's open up Bay State actually. And of course I did not activate that page. And so you would see information for that. I'll actually log back in and show what that would be under a different user and while we get that fixed. We're still working on a couple pieces of the site before we go live on Monday. So we have some things that are protected basically at this point just so that people won't accidentally stumble onto them. So let's actually go back to the chapters. And let's actually just go into Bay State first. So each group has a calendar, which the calendar we'll cover a little more actually on the second webinar. There's a series of 2 different webinars planned. This one's kind of an introduction to the main functionality. Meetings and calendar are on a second webinar. So don't want you to think I'm skipping over it, but rather we're just holding that because we want to make sure and go over that in more detail. Each group actually has a blog. Each group has a forum, and each group has a file library. So as you're seeing for Bay State chapter here, these are actually files that were in the old file library. So we pulled those over. If we go back out and go to my chapters, go to Minnesota, you'll see they had activity in their forums. We pulled the forum activity over as well too. So you don't have to try and recreate specifically the forum and file library content. And at the same time too, going back to the blogs, you can actually create a blog post. I'm actually going to do this for Minnesota, just so you can see that it's pretty simple at this point. So what I've done is actually I'm creating a blog article, and this is a tool that's good to push out marketing messages. We'll have this actually created for registration being open. Your registration is closing. Make sure to register soon. Call for speakers. We're looking for volunteers. Please email so and so. So it's a good way to push out timely messages as opposed to static content that you're going to want there throughout the year. This is who we are. This is why you should join type of messages. That can be static, but this is more for news articles, news items, things that are timely and you want to have in front of users. So I've created a blog article, and I'm going to release it. And again, you're not going to be expected to remember each of these steps. We're going to send out a document later on today that actually goes through and talks about the individual steps to do these different things. So as you can see, this is now a news item I created. So if I go back to the blog homepage, that article is here. I'm actually in the community. That same article is actually pulled in here. And what you'll see a little later is we've also created a content page. So if you're not a member of the chapter and you can't get into the community area, which is this for the chapter, which is all the information strictly for members, we're going to get this actually is going to pull into a separate page as well too, which we're actually going to go into in a little while. One of the things that you'll also see is that we have not pulled over the content from the old site. There was, actually pull up the old site. So we know what I'm referring to when I say content. Let's actually use space again, since we're talking about them anyway. So we have this page. This statement for each chapter was different, stating who they were. So we did pull this over. But then once you actually get into the chapter page itself, there was more content. So we did not actually pull over this content. Bay State seems to have something that's a little more permanent, but there were a lot of groups that had outdated content. So we saw some from 2011, 2012. So we didn't want to pull that over onto the new site. We want to start fresh for a lot of that content. And at the same time, too, there have been some issues with some of the images that have been used as well, too. And so it was another reason why we didn't actually pull over the content. It's basically we wanted to start fresh. There was a lot of inconsistencies. So you got a different look depending on who you went to or what chapter you went to. And so we are kind of starting fresh in that sense that we will also go through a little bit how to create some of that content and go through admin approval. And then, Jenna, did you want to add to anything with that as well, too?
Yeah. So when we send out the handout later today, what you'll all see are specific instructions that we've suggested for how to move content over. If there's statements on your chapter pages that you'd like to put on the new site, we're going to suggest that you copy and paste it into a Word document and route it to your chapter boards for editing to make sure that that's the most up-to-date version. And just a note about the images as well, we didn't pull those over because we have had unintentional issues in the past with copyright violations for images. So we do have a new process for loading photos that we'll explain in an email later this afternoon that will make it a more clean process for everyone, a safer process, and something that will make it much smoother going forward for all of you.
So going back over to, thank you, Jenna, going back over to the new site. We have the article here created for the Minnesota chapter. And then what I'm actually going to do is you've seen how, I'm going to jump back over to an admin, a site admin, so we can get access to a couple things that aren't live right now since the site is still in development. We're still working on it, and it's not going live until Monday. And we'll make sure and get those things activated too this afternoon when we send out the email to you, so you can make sure and have access to that. So we've seen how to get to your chapters, and there's multiple ways to do that. My chapter's here as well too, it's the same thing. And then there is your community as well too, once you actually get to that page. So I'm actually going to log out and then log back in as an admin. So one of the things that now I'm logged into the site, and you're going to see a lot more content. I wanted to show the previous user so you can see that you really, when you log in, you see what you have access to. And so it's going to be different for different users in the sense that if you don't have access to a forum or a file library, you don't see it, basically. Making sure that you are paying for dues for chapters so you can get access to that kind of content. Actually going back to the chapter list that we were looking at before, so you saw that I created an article for was it Minnesota or was it Bay State? I don't remember at this point. I think it was Minnesota. I should have So yeah, there was Minnesota. Good. Yeah, we're recording this, and so you can see this is the same article that I actually had created for under the Minnesota community. So the reason why I'm showing this is basically showing that you can create that one article in that one spot and then not have to recreate it in different spots. So you have your own individual blog. You have that blog article pulling into the community page. And you also have that article pulling into this page, which is public-facing. You don't need to be a member to actually join. And as you can see, too, if I'm not a member, I can select Request to Join. I can then pay dues and become a member of that chapter. Once I actually back off the list and go to the Aloha chapter. No, it's not good. I mean, you know what? I'm sorry. Actually, I took off some stuff that I did for the last demo. If you were a member of that organization for going back to Minnesota, instead of Request to Join, it's actually going to say Access the Minnesota community. So it makes it easy for the user to get there, was what I'm trying to convey, in the sense that there's different spots you can go depending on what you're looking for, and then you don't have to try and navigate back and find how to get into the chapter. We really wanted to make it easy for the user to get to, in the sense that we're putting it in different spots throughout the site. And even to here, they're seeing we're on a chapter page. If I want to go back to my chapter list as well too, I have that here. Again, as an admin, I'm actually seeing content for everybody. Now, if we go back to the Bay State chapter, I touched on the forums and file libraries earlier, but I'm actually going to go into a little more detail with those. So the forums, just like with the blog, you saw it was a separate tool. And then within that tool, it actually pulled content into the site. The forums and the file libraries are actually set up the same way. The forums, let's start with the file library for Bay State. This file library, for example, is a separate tool. These are the files that are here. And then if you, there's also a file library home, which you can get to here. Go to chapters. And Bay State chapter documents. You can see this is the exact same thing. It's just getting to it in a different way. Before I was getting to it from the community page. Over here, if I go back, I got to it from the file library homepage itself, which is accessible from here, or at the same time too, if you are in the file library itself too, you can always click on the file library home and go directly back to the homepage as well too for the file library. The forums are set up the same way. Let's actually go back out and go to the Minnesota chapter and look at their forum. Forum is the same thing in the sense that there is their forum. You can see bylaws, direct deposit form. Sorry, I'm clicking the wrong thing. For the board documents, those are all actually here as well too. So it's for each chapter you're going to have that same thing, and then actually have access to that. And if we go back out and even look at the chapter itself, the chapter has some forum activities. And these are the forums, and I can actually click and go into the forum directly. You can see the discussions that are there were pulled over from the old site. And at the same time, too, I can access this from the forum homepage as well, too. You can go, so if you're taking part in the general discussion, you want to jump over to your chapters. So you're taking part in the general discussion, you want to jump over to the chapters, you can do that directly from the forums and not have to search around and poke around the site to actually get there. And then a nice feature as well, too, is if you are actually in the one of the forums for your chapter, you can go directly to the community from this page as well, too. Again, just trying to make the content easy to get to, depending on where you're at. And then one other thing I will actually touch on as well, too. I'm actually going to log back out and log back in as the other user. Try that again. So a couple times I've mentioned that you only have access to what you're a member of, or you only see what you have access to. I'm only seeing here the Bay State and the Minnesota chapters. I'm logged back in as the other user that only has these communities. So if I'm on the chapter page, or if I'm in the chapter topic for the discussions for the forums, I'm only seeing those respective forums as well too. And again, because I am a member of these groups, when I go into the forum, I can jump directly to the chapter page as well too. So one of the things with the forums, which is a nice functionality to have, and I think that was there was a demand, and we definitely, CLMA definitely heard feedback and wanted to have this functionality. Since if you are in a forum, there's also a listserv functionality along with forums. Because the site isn't live yet, we don't have it turned on. Essentially, we don't want to have everybody who is in these communities, in these chapters, start receiving emails from a site that isn't live yet. It would create a lot of confusion, a lot of questions, probably more questions than it's worth. But there is the functionality to have that once the site goes live, and it is already implemented. The way we've set it up is that, as you've seen, if you are a member of the chapter, and we moved over all the chapter lists, if you are a member of the chapter, you can subscribe to the forum, and we've already set it up so that if you are a member right now, the initial setup is that you are already subscribed to that forum. So when the site goes live, all of your members will actually be subscribed to the forums for your respective chapters. Now what that means is that now that they're subscribed, if I were to go back out to the homepage or the forum itself, and I added a new thread, that means that everybody who is part of the Minnesota chapter then would get an email from this email address with the content of the forum post that I actually just posted. At the same time, too, if I were a member of the chapter, I received that email. So I'm already subscribed to that because I've gotten the email. I can actually respond directly to that email, and it would just create a new forum post in the same discussion. So if I were to, even at the same time, too, scroll on the bottom of this and actually type, or actually click reply, type a reply, everybody who is subscribed to this forum as a whole would have received my reply. And then in turn, they could actually reply directly to that email, and it's going to make another reply in this forum tracking the full conversation just in one discussion actually on the site. It works basically in that you have to be a member of the site, which you all are. You have to be a member of the chapter, which you are all a member of your respective chapters. And you have to be subscribed to the forums to to be able to receive that email and send emails back as well too. So what that does is it already knows that you are a member. You're in the system. You're a member of the chapter and subscribe. So when you send an email from your email address, it knows to then check that email and say, hey, we received this email from this person, and then it can check the system, check that they are a member, because your email address is actually on your account, and then check that account to make sure they're a member of the chapter, and check and make sure they're subscribed as well too. So when those criteria are met, which it's all already set up that way for members of the respective chapters, it then knows it's okay to post. So then it posts to the forum, whether it be a new discussion or replying to an existing one. The reason for all that, the reason why I go into that, is simply because of the fact that if Joe on the street wants to be a member of CLMA but he's not, and sends an email to one of these email addresses, if he's not a member of the chapter, and not subscribed, that forum, that post actually will not go to the forum itself. So that way, it's protected from spam in the fact that you can't actually post to it unless you are a member and a member of the forum itself. Now, one of the things I had mentioned before too was additional content. So there were different pages, basically 4 different chapters, and you saw one of the chapters I pulled up had information from 2011. And as we talked about, that's why we didn't pull that information over, just because there was inconsistencies. We want to make sure people are taking a look at everything and putting new content in. Again, the recommendation is to go onto the current site, take your content you think you might want into a Word document, so you can clean that up and edit it. And then once you have access to the chapters, you have, and everybody who is a chapter leader should be a respective admin of their individual chapters as well too. You'll have access to different admin functions within your chapter. Some of those items are actually creating content, controlling this page just a little bit, and pulling reports, which we'll go into as well. So a couple different things you can do. If you actually go to Actions and you go to Community Administration, again, step by step, you're not expected to remember. The step-by-step will actually be passed out to the people on this this call later on today. But if you go to edit HTML content, you'll see one default page already set up. What this is, I can go ahead in here and type in welcome. Click OK. So that means if I actually go back out to the community page, you'll see welcome, which is what I just typed in. So their default HTML is the content that's actually going to show up at the top here. Again, this is going to be static content, content that should be there year-round, and then your timely messages, like make sure and sign up for the 2014 Bay State Chapter Conference, should really be in the blogs, because then once you create a new blog article, that information gets pushed down. Eventually, it'll get pushed off the page. It will always be in that blog, but it won't be at the top. So you can always put new content at the top if you're using the blog. We showed that you can put content here. At the same time, too, I'm going to go back to Community Administration, edit HTML content, and I can actually create a new page. This could be about a state chapter. So you actually just put something in here as well too. Again, we'll have the step-by-step instructions out to you later on today. So when you're creating content, what we have is it's called an editor here, and this is called a WYSIWYG editor. I know that there was one on the old site, but it was not quite the it's not quite the same as this one, and that this has more options. WYSIWYG stands for what you see is what you get. So you'll see a lot of options that are probably familiar to you: bold, italics. I don't recommend using underline on a website just because people usually expect it to be a link. You can justify things as well too, make a bulleted list, numbered list. So you'll see a lot of those things you probably recognize from any word processor, such as Microsoft Word. You can type directly in here. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab some fake text. Just grabbing some fake text to put in here. So I've grabbed text from another website. I don't want to take over all of the code and formatting that was there. So I'm actually going to click on paste as plain text. I'm going to paste directly into that box. I'm going to click insert. It's going to be there as well too. I'm just going to keep going and actually do a second heading and do the same thing. And I'm going to do one more for sake of today's purposes. Enter. Paste into here as well too. So the reason why I have different headings is because I know that we mentioned that we want consistency throughout the different pages, throughout the different chapters and the content that you're actually displaying. But at the same time too, you don't want it to just be text and just plain boring text with no formatting. So you have the options for bold, italics. You can do color text as well too. But your headings, we already have headings actually set up on the site, so they're consistent throughout the site for everybody. All you need to do is select the text itself, highlight the text, go over here to styles, and you're going to see H1, H2, and H3. These are H1, heading 1, heading 2, and heading 3. So if I have that as heading 1, it knows to automatically make it that size and to make it that color, and then make it bold as well too. So that way you can have a different, you can have a layout to the text and have it be consistent and not have to play around with size, color, etc. You have different headings, so you can make nice structure to your pages as far as information goes, a page title, content heading, and then subheading as well too. And again, what we're not actually asking. Sorry, let me just try that again. We are asking to not include images at this point, simply because of the fact that we've had issues, and so we're kind of making sure that we're piecing some of this out in the sense that we want to make sure that we have a handle on the content, and then we will talk about images at a later date. So, so we have this content. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And as you can see, this page has been created. Now, the question is, too, what can you do to actually make this content live? Well, what we're going to do is we're actually going to ask that at this point, what you do is you actually email the CLMA staff and ask them to approve it. And then at this point, what we can do is we can actually add, once it's approved, we'll actually have a button that can show up here. From there, once we have actually, that the content is approved, we can actually show you how to easily create buttons as well too. You may have even seen it on the last page that I was on. So from that point as well too, let me actually go back into chapter page. We're using the Bay State chapter. Actually, we used Minnesota before, so we'll use that as another example. So just like with Minnesota, how we created a blog article and it pulled into this page, we can actually go and get the content that we just worked on and take this content and pull it into that same page that we were just looking at. But again, we want to make sure that we are just kind of checking that just to make sure that everything's set up correctly. And so when you do that, Janae on CLMA staff, if everybody would email Janae once they have that content actually created, she'll be able to take a look at it, make sure that everything is formatted the way it should be, just to create consistency throughout the site. And she in turn will then be able to show you how to add a button so that it's coming up, that content is coming up actually as an extra link here. And at the same time to pull it into that externally facing page, or that page that people can see without being a member of the chapter that we were just looking at as well too, similar to how we are pulling in the blog articles for a chapter as well too. They can show up below the news articles, and we have a limit to these to make sure that content won't get pushed too far down. So with that content as well too, that for the most part, that is going to be what you actually have on your current chapter sites, content that we want to make sure you're grabbing. And just in case it hasn't been mentioned already, the access to the old site is going to be available through Monday, June 16th. So it's another reason why we ask that you actually go in at the old site, look at the content, copy what you want to carry over into a Word document. So you have it saved, so you can work on it, you can edit it, and then you have something to go off of when you're actually going to then take that content, paste it in as plain text on the new site for those static content that's going to stay throughout the year. And so that way too, we can make sure that we're using the blog tool correctly versus the content section correctly as well then too.
And we know that this is kind of a short turnaround. We're giving you a little over a week to do this, and that's primarily because when the site goes live on Monday, we want to make sure that these pages are updated as soon as possible. And we know all of you are extremely busy with either your volunteer roles or your full-time positions, and so trying to get this done by June 16th will allow the site to be as updated as possible as quickly as it can be after it goes live.
While we're on the topic of this content and looking at the Minnesota chapter news and the fake article I have created on today's call as well too, if anybody from Bay State or Minnesota is on the call, I will be going in and getting rid of that so you don't have to worry about a news item saying this is a title for a news item showing up for everybody as well too. So the last thing that we want to show is actually your reports. So we are on the Minnesota chapter page, the community itself. This user that I have created and added to Minnesota and Bay State and made it an admin of those groups. You'll actually see these options here, admin options, and you'll also see actions. A user who is not an admin of that chapter will not see those options. Only you see them as an admin of that individual chapter. For the content, we hovered over here and went to community administration. You can also use that to, again, we're going to go to calendar items in the next call. And then there's also, you can view members and manage your membership. But for today's purposes, we want to actually show reports, community reports. Top here is what you would click on. Again, because you are in the Minnesota chapter community, you are going directly to reports for strictly the Minnesota chapter. So from here, what you can do is you can actually just get if you go to community members, you can select the reports here, and they're pre-built reports. You can just take a look at it in HTML at one point if you want to. You can see you have all of the marketing information you would need in case you want to do any type of marketing push for emails. Names, when they were actually added. This is when we did the load for all of the members, and other information for them as well too. And then if you want to, you can also select the Excel file, run the report. You can save that, you can open it. But then you can also get an Excel file of all this information, so you can do a mail merge. As you can see, there's dummy email addresses in there right now for everybody. We will have those changed when the site goes live to their live email. So that way you can use the Excel spreadsheet you can download that, make notes off to the side, you can use that for mail merge, and do whatever else you need for these reports as well too, and make sure you have access to that information. We've covered the introducing the site, making sure you know about the internal versus external log page. There is the community for an individual chapter. And then at the same time, too, there is a page if you're not a member of the chapters, so you can still see content, you can still see those marketing messages. There's the forums and the file libraries. The forums and file libraries pull into your community page. You can access those through the forum tools. You can access those file library tools, but then it's the exact same content that's pulled into your community page as well, too, just like the blogs are being pulled into other pages as well, too, so that you don't have to recreate that content and just making it easier to get to where you want to go. We've covered how to create a blog post, how to create content. Again, not expected to remember the steps to do that at this point. That will all be in the information that gets sent out later today for you. And then at the same time, too, pulling reports from members as well, too. So we have covered everything that we wanted to for today's agenda. There will be a second webinar. We definitely wanted to split it out into two. That second webinar is going to be editing your member list in case you need to, say, add another admin. There will be community calendars that we briefly saw today as well, too. That is simply a calendar item in case you want something listed as a notice. And then there will be creating an actual event. An event, you can set up prices and rules. You can do file sharing with attendees and actually have registration for your individual conferences and meetings. And the reason why we're covering that in the second webinar is we just want to make sure and give the detail that is needed to that. We know that that is a very it's a hot topic for the chapters. We know how important it is to you to have that. And so we just want to make sure that we're giving it all the detail that's needed and have time for questions, make sure we're covering everything that needs to for that functionality. So at this point, what we'd like to do is open it up to questions from the group. I believe there's been a couple that have already been submitted. And then Jenna, on their what the attendees in the webinar are seeing, where do they actually submit those questions as well to?
You can submit those questions through the chat dialog box on the right-hand side of your screen. We're going to give you all about a minute to start inserting some questions if you haven't already done so, and we'll get through as many of those as we can today. As PJ said, we'll be sending out a handout later this afternoon that will walk through step-by-step the processes that we went over this morning. We'll also give more information about the follow-up webinar, the second webinar, that will go into greater detail on some more tools. And we will also attach the link to this recording from today, so you will be able to follow that as well. So we'll be back in just about 1 minute. We'll give you time to post some questions.
Okay. Thank you for submitting all of the questions that have been so far. Please, if something else comes up or I haven't answered a question well enough, I guess, please ask for clarification in the questions as well, too. We'll see that update. So the first question, it's a great question. Do these chapters calendar feed into the calendar on the internal page, or do you have to send a separate request? No. Okay, great question. There is, so you saw there was the calendar for your community, which you can add things to. You can create an event that actually has registration to it as well too, and that will both feed into your community page. It will also feed into the overall site calendar here. So it's a great way to market your events so that everybody sees it, whether they're a member or not. Say somebody from a neighboring state, somebody in southern Michigan is pretty close to Indiana, and they want to go to an Indiana meeting. They'll see that there's an Indiana meeting actually here when they log into the site. And there is also an event calendar that's pulling in all chapter events, so people can actually scroll through and see events month to month. There's more detail. It actually looks very nice when there are actually events in there. We'll have a few events actually added for the launch on Monday. But it's just like with the blog article we were looking at earlier. You put it in that one spot, and it actually flows in other spots in the site so that you don't have to recreate that content just as you're asking. Again, just trying to make it easier to market your chapter events to members both in your chapter and not in your chapter as well, too. Is there a separate forum / listserv for the board members of each community? Yes, there is. similar to how I'm just seeing what I have access to when I go to different things between the forums, the file libraries, communities. I know I skipped over them before. So there are so for like Minnesota, for example, there's the Minnesota chapter and the Minnesota board, chapter board. It's a separate community with a separate Minnesota chapter board discussion and Minnesota chapter board documents. Again, we pulled over the documents that were in the file library or I'm not sure what was referred to on the old site, but if there were files for your chapter on the old site or for your board group as well too, we made sure and pull those over so you don't lose any of that. So when you are actually going in over the weekend, you may want to just look and make sure that everything is there as it should be as well too. Can I maximize my screen? Oh, no, sorry. I saw the second question right after that. I apologize. I didn't read ahead enough. There's a question for, in fact, I'll let Jenna take this one.
There's a question about messaging to CLMA members about the new website and changes that will be occurring as a result of having a new template like we have. We are drafting communication right now. We sent out a teaser last week, I believe, early last week, about the new website and what changes members can expect. We will be sending out an email shortly after this new website goes live on Monday that will give detailed instructions of how someone can log into the site if they are a member and the changes that you have, some of what you're seeing, the different member benefits that they have, where they can go to find some of the tools that they were used to seeing on the old site or where they may be on the new site. And from there, we will be sending out messaging every week that will highlight a tool such as blogs or forums or our new e-learning center for a couple of weeks thereafter that will go into more depth of those tools.
There was a question of how are administrators defined? Will all board members of a chapter have access to make changes, or do we need to request that access to be granted for them? As an administrator, which I believe the chapter leaders are going to be identified as the initial admins, if you want to actually give somebody else admin access, it is very easy to do. We'll make sure, we will cover this a little more in the second one, but as we are getting going, you may want to do something for the first couple weeks here. I mentioned that you can view the members. So these are the members of the Minnesota chapter board community. You can see that the user I'm using right now is in here. There's a little red dot next to my name. It makes me an administrator, or it shows I'm an administrator rather. And since I am an administrator, I can actually make somebody else. So if I wanted to make Nicole an administrator, I could actually just select add admin privileges. We'll go into a little more detail with that in the next webinar. But to answer the direct need for today's call and who we're talking to today, the chapter leaders will be made admins of their respective chapters. And then you have to be an admin of that chapter to make somebody else an admin. So you will have access to do that, and you don't need to request that from CLMA staff. And then I believe I haven't seen I haven't seen anything pop up for a few minutes. I believe the last question that we have right now is please explain. I'm sorry, it's been an hour I'm talking about. Please explain again what areas are viewable to non-members versus members. Events and news items posted as blogs are viewable to non-members. As it is right now, a non-member wouldn't. I think that's what I answered that. A non-member actually could have an account if they're a guest. I think that may be where the question is coming from, because I kind of skipped over that earlier. In the sense that when you log in, it knows that I'm a member and knows the forums I've marked as favorites. And then at the same time, too, there's tools to pull in information based on my own settings as a user. So at the same time, too, similar to how I'm a user and I've marked things as a favorite, we have it set up also, too, so the site knows whether they're a member if they've logged in. So you can be a guest and still have a login to get access to things you've purchased for the e-learning center. So once they are a let's say they're logged in, if they're a guest, instead of renew dues, they would see join CLMA. They would not see join a chapter, because you have to be a member of CLMA before you can be join the chapter. And they wouldn't see my chapters as well too. And then at the same time too, you would not have access if you're not a member, if you're a guest, or you're not even logged in. You would not have access to this screen, and you would not have access to the forums, the file libraries, if you're not a member of CLMA, and you would not have access to the respective chapter if you're not a member of that chapter. So for example, let me actually just log out entirely. Go back to the external homepage. If I wanted to just say click on chapters here, it's going to prompt me to log in. Similarly, if I am on the external homepage and I want to go to my chapters, it's going to prompt me to log in. There will be pages that actually are set up. Right now they're set up. Let me just log in as the site administrator. So there will also be, there's also these pages, like CLMA chapters, that you would have access to see as well too. You don't need to be a member of either CLMA or a chapter to see these pages. That way you can still push out marketing messages to people who aren't members of your chapter. Kind of use the example of somebody maybe in Southern Michigan might see that there's a meeting in Northern Indiana. They may want to go to it. So that way you're not limiting that marketing to people who are members of your individual chapter. So we have these pages set up so that you can have information going out to people who also aren't members of that chapter, and then have at the same time too some of that same content. Kind of we're looking at Minnesota. If you are a member of the Minnesota chapter, you can actually go into and get the actual tools, the forum, the file library. So I hope that answers the question in the sense that there's this page that you don't need to be a member of either CLMA or the chapter to see. So that way you still have those marketing messages. You still have messages, material that you can put out and market to people who aren't members of your chapter. But then you have the more specialized, content for members of your chapter, and so that way you can have that separation between the two, so you can really create value of being a member of the chapter and then make them want to pay dues rather than just going to that page that we were looking at before. And I hope that answers the question. By all means, please let me know if that is not the case. So we are right up to almost 12 o'clock. I don't see another question coming in. As we wrap up, I'll kind of keep an eye on that question box that we have, just to make sure nobody else is actually typing anything else in. And I'll hand it back over to Jenna.
Okay. Thank you, PJ. Thank you to everyone who joined today. We really appreciate you taking the time to get a first look at this website. Thank you so much, and hope you have a wonderful weekend.